Hello, welcome everyone to Opening Hearts, one story at a time. Today is going to be about autism and how it relates to substance abuse. A very close subject to my heart. Little background about autistic rumination. So basically, it's a spiral of toxic thoughts where we get stuck in a thought loop, and these inputs are amplified then in my mind. And this happens because of the tendency for me to turn feelings at the back of the brain into thoughts at the front of the brain, with the intention, thinking I can somehow solve them or control them, and then the spiral is created where I'm trying to restructure, reframe, reconstruct, and what that does is it removes me from feeling. It removes me from allowing something to move through me, past me, and essentially behind me. And so it holds me into like this preserving, setting a stage in my mind for it to continue bothering me. The only way to break this cycle of rumination is acceptance, forgiveness, mindfulness. I might need to focus my attention elsewhere somehow. New activity, meditation, prayer. But that's not easy. It takes a lot of conscious awareness that the source of the rumination, like, it can't be fixed. And that's where my powerlessness comes in, right? And that's where my faith comes in. That's where I can ask for help. I can turn it over to the sources at bay, in order to leave it behind. And on another note, as a high masking autistic, regarding meltdowns, at a young age, I was trained and taught to not have meltdowns like many of us, leading us to develop almost an impaired meltdown response. Meltdowns are so important, some might say necessary coping tools, because their purpose is to regulate our nervous system. So when we are trained to not use them to our benefit or to turn them off externally, we begin to implode within ourselves. Meltdowns are a natural response to intense overwhelm. They are operating to discharge energy. As we grow into young adults who haven't had an environment where it's safe to exercise the natural meltdown response, this is where the alcohol and substance abuse comes in. We can turn to them as a substitute to regulate ourselves. and get back to our equilibrium. They can be used in order to achieve that same effect as if we were using a healthy external meltdown modality. I found that not allowing meltdowns is extremely stressful and taxing on my body. It is essentially the feeling of being attacked and yet not able to react and discharge that energy. So discovering autistic rumination was one of those light bulb aha moments for me, and it showed me a correlation with my alcohol use, perhaps where it began, the links to its early conception, how, like, it makes me think how many alcoholics are also autistic, I wonder. And then discovering autistic meltdowns, it has shown me its link also to my alcohol use. And I like to say alcohol use rather than alcoholism, just in this context, because I think the autism part is separate as a medical definition from my alcoholism medical definition. So maybe we could just say that they are comorbid. And in my recovery, I want to talk about my story a little bit using the question someone has asked me, like, what is one of the driving forces behind your alcoholism? And I discovered that the best way to answer, based on my information with autism and what we're talking about today, the rumination and the meltdowns, to answer that question, I felt things so strongly, but I had trained myself out of releasing those feelings. I trained myself out of meltdowns really early. I remember having so much pent up energy, very young, maybe 7, this memory is, where I would go alone to my room, and nobody knows this, my parents didn't know, and I would have to have this meltdown, essentially, now I know that, where I would scream so full of force and rage into my pillow, so much so that it would cause a nosebleed, and I would do this periodically. And also another mechanism that I used as a silent release where no one was aware or watching. I used early masturbation as a release mechanism. I used to hump every corner that I could find. But as I got older, it morphed into substance use because I hadn't developed any healthy meltdown strategies or ways to release. But I knew that once I got to a certain point of drunk, that they would just come out. And so I drank, knowing that I would finally be able to release what I now know is a meltdown, and I could get out of my system. Then it became like a safety net, where if I used alcohol to feel those really strong emotional sensations, then I also ran the risk of not remembering it in its entirety, and that felt safer at the time. So essentially, what I discovered is that I had been staging meltdowns with the help of substances. And I hope that helps somebody.